everyone. Welcome to the first episode. This is the pilot episode. James, you ready?
I am ready.
So this is the first episode of the Table Ministry Podcast. Now, you may be wondering what in the world are you watching? That is completely okay. We are just glad and thrilled that you are, that you're joining us just in this conversation. So I want to introduce myself a little bit. My name is TJ Noland. I am a student pastor at a church down on the south side of Indianapolis is where we're at. And I have been in youth ministry, so a little bit about me. I am a avid Cubs fan. And so, yes, I had one good year in 2016, and I'm going to milk it for everything I can. I married my wife, Hannah, and we have a dog and 2 cats. But my biggest heart and passion is for students, to help them have this intimate, growing relationship with Jesus. And I've been doing youth ministry for coming up. Let's see, this April will be 13 years. So it's crazy. But yeah, so that's a little bit about me. But I want you to know a little bit about, this is James.
And I'm James Steniak, and I'm fairly new to the Indy area compared to TJ. I've been here about a year, and I am an ABA therapist for kids with autism, ages 2 to 6. And one thing that really drew me to this church is the passion for the students and TJ's ministry here and his heart for special needs. And as I was talking to him about it, I was really impressed with his heart, and that's basically what made me commit to the church. As I was looking for a church, that was one of the things that really stood out. So I was really impressed with that part of the ministry.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I've loved. I've always been able to see that in James and in you, is that, and that was really the heart and reason behind why we wanted to do this podcast, both via audio but then also via video, is because I know within my history as a youth worker, having conversations and knowing where to find conversations and having conversations with individual when it comes to the topic and area of children or students with special needs, physical or mental disabilities. I mean, even like food allergies and behavioral, like whether it's like ADHD and stuff. I felt so out of my scope. I felt so out of my experience and knowledge that a lot of times, and we'll talk about a little bit more today, I didn't focus on it. I didn't do it. But through some different events and God putting some families and people, individuals, and stirring in my own heart, that just began to change. And as James, as we talked, it was a huge answer to prayer, of taking and using your experiences and then going, how can we, and your knowledge and going and furthering me, but ultimately furthering the kingdom. So that's why we want to kind of let you guys know from right in the beginning of why we want to do this, like what our heart and why we want to have this why we're doing this podcast, and is because we want to have conversations with you guys. Definitely. By no means are we sitting here going, we're the professionals. Man, if you're looking for professionals, you can go find a lot better people. But just people that have that heart of not wanting to have youth workers sitting that they feel alone, that they can have conversations around this area and feel encouraged, supported, because those are things I felt and needed, those things I felt and received from you. And so we just want to let other people know that by no means are they alone, are you alone. And that's really why, that's how this came up, why we wanted to do it, right?
Yeah, that's awesome perspective. And as you're sharing it, you talked about a switch in your perspective and not even realizing, like feeling inadequate and then realizing that there's tools. Mm-hmm. What brought about that switch?
I think it was an understanding of, I think the beginning of it was there were some needs that came into different ministries that I was leading. And during that time, I either had a choice to either address it and support it and research it and try to do something, or avoid it and just go, no, we're not going to. But as I looked at my calling and my responsibility as a pastor, I was like, this is not something that I'm willing to just say no to. Like, my calling and my responsibility as a youth leader and as a pastor, and even just as a son of God, it is not okay for me to look at people conditionally, mm-hmm. to say, well, no, you're too easy or you're too hard, so I'm gonna pass.
Yeah.
And it was addressing that, but man, it's been a road.
Well, I know a lot of these transitions happened before I came in because you actually sought me out, but you brought in people originally before to even educate yourself. Yeah.
So trying to find other people that are smarter, that they're the professionals, right? And furthering myself, I definitely feel like I am just at the very tip of the iceberg of just trying to see and trying to educate myself, educate my team, and to be able to do that. But I think one of the stories, as we talked about this within this podcast, there was a specific story in Scripture that comes to mind and is really kind of one of the biggest bedrocks for us. And it's found in 2 Samuel 9, and this is when David is king, and he goes and he talks and he's asking about, hey, is there anyone still remaining from Saul and Jonathan's family line? Jonathan was this near dear friend of his. And in 2 Samuel 9, we find David's interactions with this man, Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth is this lame son of Jonathan. And Jonathan and David always had this kindled and kind of oneness relationship. And there's this interaction that David goes and he asks, and he said, who is there? And they bring Mephibosheth. We're going to probably mess that name up like 8 different times.
I'm going to probably ask you to pronounce it like several times.
But what it is, David's asking because he wants to give him his inheritance. He wants to give this stuff back to him. But Mephibosheth, when he interacts with David, his heart, when David's talking to him, he's like, who am I but a dead dog to the king?
And this is really interesting to me, this part, because his perspective is that he was nothing. And I mean, that's a mental mentality that, like, it wasn't just his thinking. Like, society had told him this.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That was a very interesting part that he's coming to David. And he's like, who am I but a dead dog?
Yeah. I mean, everyone's going, who am I to be able to be in the presence of a king? But especially Mephibosheth going, I'm lame. My family, my descendants, my grandpa tried to kill you.
Yeah.
But now, like, who am I but a dead dog? But David's response, I think, clearly articulates the heart and reflects the heart of God. And one of the things I love that he says is that he looks at Mephibosheth and says, you shall always eat at my table, like one of the king's sons. And even later on throughout 2 Samuel and even in other parts, Mephibosheth is brought back up. And it's always his characteristic of this eating at the king's table, of someone that looked and saw themselves as who am I but a dead dog? Who am I but nothing to be in the king's presence? David sit here and goes, no, like, you are always welcome at my table, and you will always eat like one of the king's sons. And it just, I'm surprised I didn't just cry because it always has moved me.
I can already feel myself getting emotional about it, just because, when you're hearing the story, I mean, you hear about David having a heart after God, but this is like the story that gives that example, and it's the underprivileged, underlooked, people overlook. Mephibosheth.
Yep, you got it.
I'm getting it, but David's heart is after God's heart, and he sees this person as someone who's going to sit at his table.
Yep. Yeah. So as a youth leader and as a youth worker and as a pastor, that's where like you had asked what changed in my mindset. It was my calling and my responsibility as a pastor and son of God was. It could not be conditional to someone or anyone based on their status or who they are or who they hang around with or anything. It can't be conditional on anything. I need to love them and always approach them and reflect God's heart. And I think that was one of the biggest bedrocks. We want you guys to know why this really matters is because we want this to be a conversation that we wish you were sitting here at this table with us. Because definitely. I know I felt in the realm of ministering to students or children with special needs, mental, physical disabilities, food allergies, any of that stuff, I felt incredibly isolated. And so we want you all to know whether you are a beginning youth worker, whether this is something that is prevalent or is real in your youth ministry or in your church or in your small group, whatever it is, you're not alone. We want you to know that we pray for you, want to encourage you, and we wish you were sitting at this table. And that's what we want these podcasts to be, is just this conversation as if you were here.
Yeah, and I think the original idea for it came up when we were at camp and we were talking to other leaders and discussing, what are the challenges in this? And I just looked at TJ and I'm like, I would love to do a blog on this. And it's been a running idea for some time, but running out ideas don't always
Yeah.
play out. But TJ's like, no, you have to do this. And then that kind of formed into what we're doing now.
Yeah.
But it's just that conversation of having it. I think every leader wants to have this conversation.
Yep.
They just don't know how.
Yeah, or where.
Or where.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep, what it looks like. So what we want to do is kind of share a little bit from both of our perspectives. So you from the beginning is that like you've got a church leader perspective, the pastor for the last close to 13 years, and then also someone that is a training and everything outside of ministry as an ABA therapist, and then your experiences are very different. So two different perspectives, but a lot of the same kind of ideas and thoughts, kind of questions. And so what we want to look at today is really the specific one of reasons why this a lot of times gets avoided. I know I can look at my own life, and there's a lot of reasons why I can go, why did I avoid this for close to probably close to 8-10 years. And then also for you to be able to look and go reasons why people avoid it. And I know for me, one of the big first ones was I alluded to this a little bit, I felt incredibly clueless. I felt like, I envisioned like, if you are around engineers and you have no idea what they're talking about, if you have any acknowledgement or any knowledge or experience about what they're talking about, you feel a little bit more comfortable, like you belong
definitely.
in the conversation. This was one when I was talking with parents parents with children with special needs or anything, I felt so clueless, and there was no previous experience or knowledge that I could pull from. It was completely just, I felt like I didn't belong. And so that was one of the biggest reasons why I was like, nope,
Yep.
I'm not going to be a part. I don't want to further that. I don't want to go down that rabbit trail, or not rabbit trail. I don't want to have that conversation because I feel incredibly clueless.
And I think, I don't know, if you feel clueless, I feel like you also feel like you could just make things worse. I don't know if that was your case.
Yeah.
But I feel like when I'm clueless, I don't want to make it worse. So, what do I do?
Yeah.
And I think that brings up a couple points. And it's the lack of understanding and knowledge. I don't think we're always trained in thinking about the challenges, the physical and the mental challenges of our students, but they are there and they are needed. And when Jesus was on earth, he didn't just stick with the spiritual issues. It was a full body healing, like the spiritual, the mental, and the physical. So I think it's important to have that knowledge and understanding, but more importantly than even having it is knowing where to get it, because using resources, because we're not going to specialize. I'm not going to specialize in like the specialties that you have, but yeah.
Trying to figure out what the specialties of a youth pastor are. Yeah, everyone's
well,
dodgeball, pizza ordering.
Dodgeball,
and pizza ordering. Those are our specialties.
There we go. But yeah, so it just, everybody has their specialties. And I think understanding where to even go for those resources.
Yeah. And it was also for me, I think, when, like you mentioned this a little bit, is that am I afraid that I'm going to make something worse? If I try something, what am I going to do? What impact is this going to have on the individual? For me, it was one of the other reasons why I avoided it is I was greatly scared of failing. I think this failure of going, because it's not a failing of an event, or it's not a failing of a sermon or something. It is a feeling. It was this feeling of failing an individual, a family.
I imagine that's quite a big weight to carry too.
It was huge, and I was like, oh my gosh. So it would literally be something that would stop me, and I would avoided going down and furthering my education or my knowledge of how to minister to this student and this family this kid that has special needs. I was like, I don't want to fail, because I'm not failing. I don't feel like I was failing myself. I felt like I was failing them, and I felt like I was ultimately failing God. So I was like, no, I'm gonna avoid it.
That would be, easy thing to just avoid, as far as if you're having that feeling, it's like, I'd rather avoid it than to fail. And I could totally understand that.
That's a lot easier to be at peace with, being able to go, well, I felt like I was playing it safe. Or kind of go, no, because I feel like I could maybe be protecting them versus somehow harming them if I failed.
And another point I brought up on this is I think daily routine can get in the way of the challenges of those with special needs. So in our daily routine, as a youth pastor, is it difficult to think about the extra that goes into those with challenges?
Oh yeah, because we're sitting there thinking we've got all these responsibilities from senior leadership, our responsibilities to just the grind of every week, the message prep, the social media posts, the connecting with leaders, the event planning for next week, and then felt it could that anything that disrupts and challenges that routine, it's like, oh, I don't have that time. Where am I going to get it? And sometimes it takes away from family. Then it adds different stress.
When with food allergies, you brought this up, but like if you're planning an event and you have food, you have 10 different food allergies to worry about, I'm sure that's not fun with the routine.
No, not at all.
But yeah, it's still needed because, everybody needs to have that place to go. So how do you deal with different students having different
I think
challenges?
it's being all fine talking to them, and we'll talk about it in some later episodes of really being able to know. I think a lot of that goes back to the understanding and partnering with the parents, and really being able to look at it, going, what can I feasibly do, and really asking that instead. I was not okay doing nothing, and so it was asking, what can I feasibly do to show this kid and to show this family that they are loved, that they belong here, and ultimately that they do have a seat at God's table, and having conversations with them to go, oh, I have no idea, like there was a family that it was food allergies, and they were like, I want my son to be involved. And we would talk to him, and I was like, hey, I don't know. And they were like, we will pay for X. Or if you have pizza, we can do X. They know and live in that world. And so it was being able to leverage them to go, how can we overcome this and actually do something, instead of me just going, no, because the reward and my responsibility of actually not the reward of my responsibility, but my, like, seeing that kid engage in the kingdom outweighed any kind of potential hiccup in my rhythm.
So even though you had to get out of your routine, the reward was there.
Oh, it's far greater. Far greater. Yep.
And it's so easy to get stuck in routines. I do it every day, and if we don't think about getting outside of our routine, we won't see those rewards.
Yep, exactly.
So also with being a youth pastor, have you felt that it might be out of your scope of practice when you're facing different challenges?
Yes. Yeah, it was definitely there was no class in college. There was a lot of it comes all from either furthering education within reading, experiences, or that kind of stuff. There was nothing in my previous experience for me to be able to go back on. So yeah, there was this ill-equipped, feeling clueless, just lack of preparing that was always present. And I think it just fed so much of these insecurities. And there was also I think one of the other reasons why I avoided it was just feeling attacked. That in my lack of knowledge or in my insecurities, like Satan just used that and attacked me. And individually, and just going to feeding these things of going, you don't know what you're talking about. You're going to mess up this kid. You don't know what you're doing. Why are you doing this? It's too much work, and just fed that. And so it became paralyzing at times. Yeah. Of the drive to overcome this avoidance of ministering to and partnering and understanding the kids with special needs in my ministry, or the kids with food allergies or physical disabilities or ADHD or really anything. It just fed this insecurity in me and really made me feel isolated. And that was, again, that's one of my biggest hearts and reasons why wanting to do this with you in this podcast is just helping youth workers know you're not alone, and you can overcome that. You can move out of that feeling of stuck in isolation, because God's got something so much greater.
And He does.
So
He does.
Beautiful with this, man. Like man.
Okay, so if we're taking home one thing, what would we do to take home from this podcast?
I think from this
episode.
I think from this one, it is really a praying for your heart and your mind to change. Nothing that is where ultimately that I had to change in the beginning was the way that I saw things, the way that I thought through things, and aligning my heart and my mind to God and allowing Him to work through me. I think when we look back, like in 2 Samuel 1:9, that's where David's heart, the way that he saw Mephibosheth was because of his aligning in the way that he saw God. And the way that he then understood the way that God saw him. And he was like, I'm seeing Mephibosheth in the same way, in the same light that God had. So I would encourage anyone that's watching or listening to be able to sit there and be like, pray literally for the first time, pray for your heart and for your mind for God to be able to work in you, and then begin to open up and just look around for the opportunities. Because as my mind and my heart began to change and shift, that's where I saw so many other opportunities to share the gospel and the love of Jesus with kids and students in families that maybe felt like they had no place to belong, because no one maybe understood them and their circumstances, and then just the reality for them. So praying for my mind and my heart to change, and then also just beginning to open up my eyes to see all these different opportunities.
I'm just super encouraged by the fact that we're able to have this conversation, and I think God has something great for this, and I'm excited for the episodes to come.
Yeah.
I think next episode we're talking about parents.
Yep.
Do you have anything on that?
Yeah, so a little teaser. So we are, the next couple ones, we're going to specifically dial into engaging parents. First one is going to be reasons why we don't and reasons and why we should. And then the third one is going to be specifically kind of on some practices and some things that we've done to kind of begin that conversation with parents instead of just sitting back and doing nothing. And so I'm bummed I didn't ask this. Let me ask you.
Okay.
Why do you do what you do? Not just professionally, yes, but like what's at the heart level? Why?
Well, first off, I realized I didn't actually say what ABA is, but it's applied behavior analysis. So I work with kids with autism, and we try to encourage positive behavior. But the reason why it goes way back to even when I was at age 4, I really had a heart for people, and I felt a calling to ministry. And but it was more of a ministry for people, and like even at that age, I could I would say I have empathetic feelings for those around me. And seeing those, and so at age 4, I got this calling through God. And through high school, I didn't know exactly how that looked. I thought maybe even youth ministry. I thought lead pastor, that kind of thing. But as I went to college and it developed, it became more of a social work. And so I got my bachelor's of science in social work. But I think it was that calling that I saw in the church that there's a need for people who are really hurting. And sometimes we avoid the tough topics of, whether it's depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts. And I wanted our church to be able to engage in those conversations. And the spiritual health is important, but Jesus didn't just heal spiritually. He healed physically. And so as I saw that, I wanted to be able to bring that to the church. So my idea was to become a counselor in a church. And that role is kind of not been exactly what I thought it would be now, because right now I'm working with kids 2 to 6, but the heart behind it has always been there.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome. And so, dude, I'm thrilled, and for seeing how God is going to continue to use you, use us, use this podcast. And so we want to encourage, if you're listening or watching, again, you're not alone. We just want you to know we're praying for you, care for you guys greatly. If there's any, and then also please feel free to, in the description of the video, write questions or anything like that. Also follow us and like us on our Facebook page. And that way you can submit questions and stuff through there to saying, hey, like any way that we can pray for you, any way that we can encourage you, anything we can just have a conversation with you. If it's like, if you feel alone and you're like, I don't know, I have this need, I have this question, I have no one to talk to. Well, feel free.
And you said it best. We want it to be a conversation. We don't want it to be a one-way, this is what you need to know. So we would love questions, and hopefully we can even answer some of those as we go along.
Yep.
But yeah, feedback would be awesome.
Yep, awesome. So thanks again for watching first episode.
Yeah, thank you.
Now the butterflies are like kind of calmed down, and I think they're sleeping a little bit. But again, thanks for watching. Make sure to come, like us, subscribe us, share it, and we'll see you guys at the next episode.
Perfect.
See you later.